Hello and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Fiona Armstrong. I'm the founder and executive director of the Climate and Health Alliance. I'm involved in the Better Futures Australia initiative. I'm part of the steering committee and I'm also co-convening the health sector's climate action and advocacy agenda as part of Better Futures Australia. So I'm really delighted to be part of this initiative. I've longed for the climate movement to become much broader and more diverse, because I think it's only when we build a massive movement for action across sectors and across communities that it will become politically untenable not to act. We also want there to be a social norm around climate action. As Naomi Klein says, to change everything, we need everyone. And I think that Better Futures Australia is a really powerful initiative that can contribute to that. Over the next hour, we're going to hear from several amazing individuals who are leading climate action across different sectors. Better Futures Australia aims to bring together all sectors of society and communities across Australia and provide a platform that Australians can own to drive ambitious climate action together. And thanks to the co-conveners who are doing excellent work already in several sector working groups: First Nations, health, finance, insurance, agriculture and local government. Better Futures Australia provides an opportunity for us to seize on this unique moment of disruption and chart a course for a better future, one that prioritises climate action and a fair and healthy society. We hope to reach people who are not yet engaged and who may not yet be aware of the incredible commitments and important work that's happening in this space. We hope that by demonstrating this society-wide commitment, that we can positively influence Australian governments to deliver credible, long-term national climate policy in time for COP26. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Auntie Faye to do an acknowledgement of country. Auntie Faye is a senior Boonwurrung and Wamba Wamba elder, a First Nations community leader and a Koori court elder. She is a Boonwurrung and Wemba Wemba language specialist and works as a prison educator in First Nations languages and a creative language revival consultant and collaborator. We're very pleased to have you. Welcome and thanks, Auntie Faye.
Hi everyone, my name's Faye Stewart-Muir. I'm a Boonwurrung, Wamba Wamba and Gaia woman living on Wadawurrung country here in Geelong, and I'd like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people on whose lands I live and work and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, as well as to all elders whose lands we all live and work on wherever you are throughout Australia. As a First Nations woman, I invite you all to walk with us as we care for Mother Earth. We have been caring for our mother for tens of thousands of years with our knowledge that's been handed down by our elders over those many generations. Our knowledge of country is there to share with you if you are willing to listen. Because of climate change that is devastating our country through drought, fires and floods, we all need to do so much more. Our mother weeps with the devastation she sees all around her. Take the time to sit and walk with us. Listen to country speak to you. It's time to take action together so that we can leave a legacy for the next generations to come. Our children are raising their voices on climate change and stating loudly what they want for this country. And this is coming from the mouths of babes. So I say to you all, stay strong and raise your voices so that the governments sit up and take notice, as too much devastation has occurred since settlement. And now it is time to act. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Auntie Faye. I would also like to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work, and acknowledge that sovereignty of the land that we call Australia has never been ceded. At Climate and Health Alliance, where I work, we commit to listening to and learning from First Nations people about how we can better reflect Indigenous ways of being and knowing in our work. It's now my great pleasure to introduce Sarah Wilson, who will speak to the opportunity that we find ourselves in possession of, the need for this conversation, the timing, and the power within us all to step up. Sarah Wilson is the author of the New York Times best-selling First, We Make the Beast Beautiful, a new story about anxiety, which has been described as the best book on living with anxiety ever read. She's also the author of I Quit Sugar, along with 11 cookbooks that have been published in 52 countries. Previously, Sarah has been editor of Cosmopolitan Australia, host of MasterChef Australia, and founder of iQuitSugar.com. Her new book, This One Wild and Precious Life, spans the subjects of the climate crisis, political polarization, racial injustice, and draws on science, philosophy, and spirituality to bring us on a new journey. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Fiona, for that introduction. As you mentioned, I've been asked to just sort of set some context for today's Better Futures Australia discussion, and off the back of the publication of my recent book, This One Wild and Precious Life. And the subtitle to this book is A Hopeful Path Forward in a Fractured World, which I think is very much what we're all here today trying to map. So what does a hopeful path look like? Well, when I first set off, I actually wrote the book pivoting from the climate crisis. Now, this was 3 years ago. Of course, since then, we've had the bushfires, we've had the COVID pandemic, we've had now a recession, the Black Lives Matters riots. And what I was finding, however, is when I kept going back to the climate activation stuff, nothing was getting through. And so at the end of last year, early this year, I reached a point where I'm sure many of you who've joined today have reached before, where there's a sense of overwhelmed despair and a sense that there's nothing we can do to actually fight what we face. We've all hit that point before, and I hit that point, unfortunately, a few weeks before my deadline. This was clarified in some ways with the bushfires. I had to put my book on pause. And what I saw, I thought I'd wait to see what happened post bushfires. We're all expecting there to be this sort of mass mobilisation around the issue. Unfortunately, Ipsos and the Fairfax papers did 2 polls and found that polarisation around climate science only increased off the back of the bushfires, which left me in a fairly dispirited place. Again, a few weeks before it was meant to go to the printers, I still didn't have my path forward, and I did not know what I was going to do. I was in this state of existential despair. And I spoke to a friend, and he said, the way that you live, the way that you get mobilised and activated around climate, renewable energy science, etc., he said, you find it charming. You enjoy it. Show us the charm. What he encouraged me to do was to actually find a way to convince people that this way of living is more charming than the status quo. And that's what I realised was missing from the debate. We were talking in CO2 tonnage, we were talking in terms of recycling deficiencies, we were talking in terms of these sort of objective things out there somewhere. What was missing was a dialogue, a path that showed us that living this new way, this new exciting way, was more charming. So I actually went out hiking the following day, which is what I do when I get stuck with anything or when I need to clarify things further. And the trajectory of this book is told via hikes around the world in the footsteps of Nietzsche and Wordsworth and a bunch of poets to clarify some of these essential ideas about how to activate, mobilise and live a life that is connected and in congruence with nature. And I went out and pounded my way through the Royal National Park and gradually got into the space I always get into, which is a place of attunement with nature. I noticed the birds in the sky, a murmuration, that group of birds that moves effortlessly, where we don't know which bird makes the first move, left or right. And to this day, naturalists still haven't worked out what actually makes a murmuration move like that. One thing that I did find out, and I remembered this as I was doing this hike, was that people have called it group soul. That was the closest anyone could actually come to describing what happens. And I thought that was a really interesting term. I then got back to the train station and I realised that this was what was charming, and that what we as humans do is that we will save what we love. And what we were suffering from was a mass disconnection. We were disconnected from ourselves, like our true nature. We were disconnected from each other, and we were disconnected from nature. And that the salvation, the solution could possibly be to go straight back to the original thing, and that is to nature. If we love nature, if we reconnect with it, we will save it. And I felt that that was a massive missing piece. And I feel that this is something that we face today. We actually need to have much more faith in where we're at as humans and what we're able to do as humans. The solution is not going to come about through banging people over the head, bludgeoning them with stark messaging. We're going to have to show some positive messaging. And that's what I really like about Better Futures Australia, is that is the messaging. So I suppose a number of the fun and exciting challenges that Australia and all of us here today face can probably be brought to a few, I think, really important points, which I'm sure will be covered today by many of the speakers. The first that needs to be recognised is that the solutions exist. There are some incredible theories, there's incredible technology that already exists. It exists around the world. What needs to happen is we need to bring it forward, we need to put it in place, implement it, live by it, all of it all at once. There's a bunch of books and great texts on it all. And here in Australia, we have incredible resources. What's missing, of course, is collective will, that group soul, if you like, that engagement at the collective level where we will mobilise en masse and get behind these technologies and these advancements. So this is the thing I think we need to focus on. Now, how do we go about that? One thing I think needs to be discussed is individualism. We often feel that we as individuals must solve this. This is actually bigger than that, and we need to have a discussion around why we feel that we as individuals have to solve it, and to actually dial down the pressure that people are feeling that causes them to become overwhelmed and then to become paralysed into inaction, which is probably one of the most toxic things that can happen in the movement today. In terms of fighting overwhelm, I think there's a number of measures that we need to start discussing, including starting where you are. Action begets action, and that's a very positive line of thinking, psychological thinking, that we need to remind ourselves of going forward. Get people enrolled at one step, and then they will tend to take on more and more measures and get engaged and mobilised at exponential rates. Another piece in all of this that I think does need to be discussed is this notion of resilience. We need to get, and particularly with young people, comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think the truth of where we're at today, the sense of urgency, the work that we have ahead of us is deeply uncomfortable. But therein lies our motivational point. What we need to do is get comfortable with this discomfort and have a lot more dialogue around it with young people. We now already know that a big stumbling point is the mental health aspect of this, that there's a lot of fear that stops people from acting. And I think if we can have discussion around the fact that this is meant to be uncomfortable, that will certainly assist. And to that end, I think we also need to make urgency feel safe. This is a crisis. There isn't time to waste. The 2050 deadline is an upper limit, and that's the way that we need to be discussing this. However, at the same time, we need to be having a discussion around the idea that urgency can be invigorating, it can be incredibly activating, it can be life-enhancing. In fact, it can create the meaning to our existence. And I like to remind people of the sporting analogy that's often pulled out in times of crisis. More than what is reasonable, or I should say that the number of games in sporting history that have been won in the final seconds by the losing side, throwing the playbook out the window and throwing everything at that final try, the home run, the whatever it might be. I mean, it is ridiculous the number of times that has saved the day. And it's these kinds of analogies, it's this kind of mindset, this invigorating aspect to urgency that we need to actually tap into again. War leaders were able to do it during wartime, particularly during the Second World War. That kind of incredibly invigorating mobilisation is what we need to tap into with humans today and here in Australia. As a final note, and I've got to keep this brief so that you all stay on track today, Milton Friedman, ironically, the founder of the founding father of contemporary neoliberalism, which landed us in this mess that we find ourselves in today, once said that a crisis can produce real change. Now, Fiona, you mentioned in your introduction that we've had an incredible pause button hit. We've got an opportunity here to reset. So if a crisis produces real change, Milton Friedman said, he said that it will all depend, what actually happens afterwards will all depend on the ideas that are lying around at the time. That's where we're at. We need to ensure the ideas that are lying around right now, today, are the kind that we want to take us forward into the future. So I hope today is an opportunity to galvanise some of these ideas that go beyond scary tactics and notions of CO2 tonnage and all the stuff that has not worked previously. Hopefully this is an opportunity to talk about the positives and what is actually ahead of us in terms of possibility for this country. I wish you all luck today, and I hope you enjoy the various speakers that are going to share some of these ideas with you. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was absolutely fabulous. I love the idea of considering climate action and climate friendly lifestyles is charming. I think the framing of that is really interesting. I love the idea of conceiving ourselves as a murmuration. That's just, you know, you can never talk too much about murmurations. That's wonderful. And I also love the idea of thinking of ourselves as being in the final few seconds of a grand final and throwing everything that we've got at this. I think that's actually quite exhilarating and invigorating. So thank you very much for that. It's now my pleasure to introduce Julianne Richards, who is CANA, Climate Action Network Australia's Executive Director. Julianne leads on strategy and planning across the network and supports CANA staff to grow an effective and diverse climate movement in Australia. Julianne's going to talk us through the Better Futures Australia initiative. Thanks, Julianne.
Thanks, Fiona, and welcome everyone. I'm pleased to be speaking on behalf of Climate Action Network Australia, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land I'm on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respect to elders past and present. Better Futures Australia was born during the terrible fires that we've heard about, the terrible black summer that we lived through over the 2019-2020 summer. As the fires raged for months, and we saw terrible scenes of destruction whilst our cities were blanketed in smoke, the thing that we heard was people from all walks of life looking for ways that they could contribute to the climate solution, how they could increase their own climate action and see how it could contribute to a greater whole, helping to drive ambitious climate action in our communities, in our economy, at all levels of government, and adding up to a credible national climate plan to put our society on a pathway for better futures for all. We at CANA have been pleased to work with our partners, which have included, it's a long list, WWF, Australian Conservation Foundation, Investor Group on Climate Change, Climate Works Australia, Climate and Health Alliance, the Sunrise Project, Australian Council of Social Service, the Climate Council, Beyond Zero Emissions, the Business Council for Sustainable Development, ARC 2030, and too many other organisations to name here today to help bring Better Futures Australia to life. Better Futures Australia is designed as a space to engage and connect climate champions from all sectors of society and the economy, so that we can share plans and achievements, reach out to peers and leverage further action in the sectors that we work in other sectors, and ultimately across levels of government as well. Better Futures Australia aims to harness the already existing enthusiasm and commitment to climate action. The sectors that you can see on the screen now represent the dozens of climate champions and amazing sector co-conveners that are working closely with us. Many of them are here on the call today. With their support and the work they're doing to build and maintain these diverse networks, Better Futures Australia will amplify the voices representing leaders from nearly every sector of society. As you can see here, it includes companies and investors, farmers and landholders, local councils and cities, First Nations organisations, healthcare institutions, social service organisations, academic and cultural institutions, faith communities, artist institutions, and community organisations. Because it will take all of us from all walks of life within and across our sectors and communities to work towards zero emissions and the better futures that will represent. Everyone's got a role to play, including all levels of government, who we invite to join us. We invite councils, states and territories, the federal government to partner with and work alongside us in meeting our ambition and setting ambitious climate action plans, including a national climate plan that reflects the ambition Australians want to see and the ambition that can guarantee us better futures. Together, we're building a Better Futures Australia community that's already providing sustainable jobs, driving innovation and collaborating to develop creative and inclusive solutions to climate change. By working together, we can drive the change that's needed to create better futures for all Australians. Better Futures Australia is a platform that will allow us to build on existing actions, commitments and enthusiasms and seize this moment in time. It will help us provide hope by showing the willingness of fellow Australians to act on climate today. Together, we can do this. Today, we're inviting you to get on board and join us. Let's bridge the divides and work together to put Australia on a pathway to zero emissions and better futures for us and for everyone and for everything that we care about. Thanks.
Many thanks, Julianne, and I'm delighted to say we're doing really well. We're on time. So it's my pleasure now to introduce three Better Futures Australia ambassadors, Damon Gameau, Dr. Virginia Marshall, and Meliani Havia. While our ambassadors share the traditional land on which they live and work, a quintessential Australian childhood memory, and why, in their words, we need to act. We have a way for you in the audience to engage. So please, while you're listening to our ambassadors, we invite you to also share in the chat the country you are on, if you know, your own quintessential childhood memory of nature or the environment, and why you think we need to collectively act and step up on climate change. So it's my pleasure to first introduce Damon Gameau. If you don't know Damon, you may know his incredible film 2040, an innovative feature documentary that explores what the future would look like by the year 2040 if we embrace the best possible solutions available to us right now. It was released in April 2019 and is already among the top 5 highest grossing documentaries of all time in Australia at the cinema. Welcome, Damon.
Thanks, Fiona, and thanks for everyone being here. I'm speaking from the Bundjalung Nation of the Arakwal people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Probably I was asked to think of a sort of a childhood memory that relates to nature, and it would probably be sort of early teen years, travelling up to the Northern Territory for the first time, driving right across Australia. I grew up in Adelaide, and getting to Litchfield National Park and the magnificence of many of their waterfalls there. And I was with a couple of friends, and we were sort of cheeky teenage boys, and we actually climbed to the top of one of the falls there, Wongai Falls, and many people might not be aware, but there's a series of rock pools, very, very deep rock pools that go down almost the entire way down the bottom of the falls. And I remember just sitting in one of those pools, looking out over the escarpment as the sun was setting in the way that it only can in the territory, and just having my breath taken away for the first time. And I wasn't a young man then and didn't understand the significance that I do now of nature, but without understanding it intellectually, I felt it at that moment, and that memory has always stuck with me. And I've been back there multiple times, and have taken my daughter back there as well. So for me, somewhere nature made an imprint in that moment and revealed its meaning and value to me at a young age. And I reckon I've carried that with me ever since. The reason I think we need to act urgently is obvious. I've got 2 daughters. I have deep concerns about their future, the way we're headed, the trajectory we're headed. And I really think that this is an opportunity. We need to reframe this moment, not as a crisis, but as an incredible, extraordinary opportunity to fundamentally transform how we interact with each other and all our living systems. And to be alive at that time in history as a human being, I think is an enormous privilege. So we should tell more of those stories, get excited by what's possible, and bring more and more people onto the journey. Because we all know what happens if we keep going down the path we're going. So why not start telling a different story and spreading a different message about this extraordinary moment in time that we find ourselves in? If we all come together, we can pull it off and pull off something extraordinary.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Damon. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Virginia Marshall, who among many roles is a practicing lawyer and legal scholar. Her research doctoral thesis won a prestigious award, and it was published as a groundbreaking Aboriginal water rights book titled Overturning Aqua Nullius, Securing Aboriginal Water Rights, which was launched in Sydney by the Honourable Michael Kirby. Welcome, Virginia.
Yuridu Marang. Hello to everyone. I work on Gadigal and Ngambia and Ngunnawal lands, and I'm now broadcasting from Dharawal lands. So I am Wiradjuri Nyemba woman, a mother of 4, an educator, a legal academic and practicing lawyer, and as the inaugural Indigenous postdoctoral fellow at the Australian National University, working with the School of Regulation and Global Governance and the Fenner School of Environment and Science Society. My work lies at the intersection of law, regulation and science, with a focus on Indigenous water rights and the impact of climate change on Indigenous peoples. Indigenous Australians are the oldest living continuous culture on the earth. Our culture of belonging to country, of obligation towards country, and our practice of caring for country left Australia one of the most biodiverse places on earth. Our sophisticated approach to land and water management on the driest inhabited continent protected the vast expanses of fragile soils, safeguarded the continent's waters, and maintained an exceptionally high biodiversity. When the first fleet arrived on these shores, they didn't value Aboriginal knowledge of this ancient land and were willfully blind to our sovereignty and our system of laws. We have never ceded our sovereignty, nor can we step away from our obligation to care for country. We all remember the catastrophic 2019 fires which ripped through 1/5 of this country's forests, killing billions of native animals. This stems from a failure to bring Aboriginal fire knowledge and Aboriginal science into mainstream land management. We all remember the impact of the severe drought and the mismanagement of this country's rivers and wetlands on the Murray-Darling Basin, the mass fish kills, the grief of traditional owners, and many others. This is the legacy of Aboriginal exclusion from water resource management. The Murray-Darling Basin Royal Commission found that more that should be done to ensure that the depth of insight, knowledge and experience of Aboriginal people are embraced. The Indigenous Peoples Organisation is a coalition of 285 Aboriginal organisations and members that advocate for Aboriginal rights. Climate change is a critical concern for Aboriginal communities, so the IPO is pleased to put forward ambassadors, myself as the IPO Climate Champion, Pastor Ray Minnekong, and IPO co-chair Catherine Eatock, to ensure Aboriginal perspectives are reflected and to work collaboratively with Better Futures Australia to progress its vital work. The IPO has been working with Indigenous people across the world to highlight the impacts of climate change. Who isn't aware of the fires in the Amazon that threatens the lungs of the earth, and seriously impacts the Indigenous peoples of the Amazon. The forests of traditional peoples in Borneo and Southeast Asia are also being cleared at alarming rates. The list goes on and on and on. It is time for all Australians to join the growing worldwide movement for change. We are facing a climate emergency, and we need to work together now more urgently than ever, and really ask you to join this amazing opportunity. Manangur.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Virginia. Very inspiring words. It's wonderful to have you involved. It's now my pleasure to introduce Meliani Harvia, who is the CEO of Small Giants Academy and the chair of B Lab in Australia and New Zealand. Meliani has a varied background from corporate law to community and human rights law, with an Oxford MBA thrown in for good measure. At the Skoll Centre for Social Entrepreneurship, Meliani became enamoured by the idea of social and responsible business and the power of storytelling. Welcome, Meliani.
Thanks so much, Fiona. Thank you, everyone, for coming and being here. It's really such a pleasure to be here, and I am quite moved by what I've heard so far, and also really filled with hope about what is possible when we all join together around this. I am I'm zooming in from Port Arlington, where the traditional custodians of the land are the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation. So I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, noting, of course, that they include Auntie Faye, who did the welcome to country for us here. So my earliest memory of feeling a connection to nature was actually when I was a small child in Tonga, which is where I lived before my family migrated to Australia. And in Tonga, the constitution requires that all families be given land to farm. So subsistence farming and eating the food that you grow yourself is a really normal part of life. And so when I was asked that question, I immediately remembered running through our family's plantation, eating bananas and drinking coconut water from coconuts versus from the carton, like I did this morning, eating the mangoes and papayas, and just really feeling a deep connection to the food that I was eating and the land that I was on, as a provider of my food and my sustenance. And a really big part of the dream, the hope that I hold for our future in Australia is that my children and your children and all of our children will be able to experience the beauty of this connection, the beauty of understanding the relationship that we have to land, the incredible natural wonders of our country and of our planetary home. And as you said, Sarah, just really remembering how connected we all are as a key part of the charm of what's in front of us. So at Small Giants Academy, we share stories and run learning programs which promote empathy and the next economy. And for us, the next economy is the way we talk about this hopeful future. It's an economy which is powered by clean and renewable energy, where business is a force for good, and where healthy and nutritious food is grown in a way that regenerates soil rather than destroys it. So some might think that this is actually a utopian ideal, but as we've heard already from a number of people on the call, this future is actually here now, and all of the technology and the practice and the examples are actually around today. Just watch Damon's film and you'll see 2040, if you haven't seen it, is a wonderful vision for the future. And so in the community of organisations and people that we have around us at the Small Giants Academy, we see these examples all the time. We see impact investment, the Impact Investment Group, which is constantly working to increase private investment, private capital into solar farms across the country. We are also part of a growing community of certified B corporations. These are businesses who have voluntarily signed up to be held accountable to a different metric of success, different standards of success. So they are about trying to maximize impact and purpose versus just maximizing profit. And then finally, something that I'm obviously deeply connected to my heart is that we are also a part of demonstrating how regenerative farming can be done in a way which is sustainable business model. And there's a beautiful farm called Mossy Willow Farm down on the Mornington Peninsula, which is an example of a thriving market garden business, which is actually feeding families whilst regenerating the land. It's a beautiful example of this possibility. So at Small Giants Academy, we are really, really proud to be a part of the Better Futures Australia initiative. We think that it's really essential to continue to showcase these examples and many more real world opportunities and solutions that we can find and easily see around us today. And this is an essential part of mobilising all of our voices around climate. So thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Meliani. Thanks for your lovely story. And I agree, you know, some of the stories that we're hearing are incredibly moving, and I'm somewhat distracted by the lovely stories that we're seeing being shared in the chat as well. So if you haven't already shared the country that you're on, your own childhood memory and what you think the opportunity is right now, then I encourage you to do so, because it is very inspiring to read those stories. It's now my pleasure to introduce 3 of our champions for the Better Futures Australia initiative. We'll hear 3 positive solution stories, proof of what's possible, and hear about some of the opportunities that exist in terms of jobs, in industry and regeneration, for humanity, and importantly, for hope. So we're going to hear again from Damon Gameau. I mentioned his film before, but didn't say that Damon is a sought after speaker and spoke at the 2019 UN Climate Action Summit in New York. He's also addressed numerous governments around the world and spoken to organisations such as Google, BP, PwC, ANZ, Zurich, Atlassian, and many more. And Damon was a New South Wales nomination for Australian of the Year in 2020. Welcome back, Damon.
Thanks, Fiona. I guess what I thought I'd just talk about really briefly is just the importance of storytelling in this moment. And certainly that's what the big takeaway that I think we've discovered from Making 2040 is that humans are a species that's evolved to tell stories. And sometimes we can think that the next graph or the next fact or the next bit of logic is the thing that's going to move us collectively. But I think we've got evidence now to say that that's actually not the case, that we all live in a meta-narrative. And we know right now we are struggling to find some air amongst this narrative war that is going on. Everyone's got to say, everyone's telling a story. And we've seen that particularly relevant in this COVID moment as humans look for patterns of meaning and identify with some kind of story. So I think it's important to consider, all of us, what are the collective myths? What are the collective metaphors or the patterns of meaning to tell this new story? Because those myths and metaphors aren't working for us now. The story we have is largely based on domination and extraction. And these play out all around us in our relationships. We're constantly told that we are selfish and we're self-centered, and yet we're incentivizing that kind of behavior. What would a new system look like if we incentivized interconnectedness, regeneration, these type of words, decentralization? We have such a complex system now that to think we can make decisions from a centralized space is almost laughable. So we have to really think about what new system we want to create that is going to actually not only mitigate climate change, but heal the social cohesion that we've ripped apart, heal all the ecological damage that we've done. If we try and tinker around the edges, we're not going to get through this. And if we just fix climate change, we're going to have to deal with our overuse of resource consumption, all the income inequalities. So there is an enormous new story that we need to tell. And that's particularly why I do the work I do, because I think artists, musicians, songwriters, poets, this is the moment for all of us to step up, to disseminate some of that science, make it more relatable, talk to people at the level that they need, human needs, security, health, the future of our children. Let's not get lost in the climate clutter of 1.5 degree warming and anthropogenic and zero net targets and emissions. That doesn't stir the soul. We really need all creatives to get engaged and step up in this process. And I'd say that after releasing the film now, it's almost been a couple of years, we've got really tangible evidence that this can equate to action. So what I'm the most proud of is not the response that the films had around the world. It's what our community has actually brought to life after seeing the film. So we were able to set up an impact campaign where people straight away could go. We asked them some questions. They filled out a questionnaire about the type of person they are, what their particular interests are. So we're not being prescriptive about saying to everyone, eat less meat and ride your bike to work and change your light globes. That's not going to resonate with everyone. How do we cater to people's specific passions? And we've seen the solutions be brought to life from the film. So whether that's the seaweed platform that's now being built in Tasmania, because our community raised that money, almost $1 million. The same with the microgrids, the same with helping farmers. We've had 1 million school children in Australia be taught the curriculum materials because teachers wanted to teach the children solutions, to inspire them with the careers of the future, not constantly tell them how degraded the planet is. So there's a real interesting lesson there, and actually being careful with that narrative. And it's not to say we shy away from the urgency. We still absolutely need to acknowledge that. But if we are going to constantly sound the fire alarm, we've also got to show people where the exits are. Otherwise they get paralyzed and they get stuck in the middle of the room. And what gives me the most hope, apart from meeting this younger generation and especially the youth that are just so eloquent and articulate in this area, is that for a new project I'm doing, we've just done a bit of a listening exercise around Australia and spent the last few months going into bushfire affected communities, Indigenous groups, tradies, people in the cities. And we have far more in common than we realise. And it's been really heartening to hear people, even if they're not saying the words climate change or helping the environment, they're all talking about greener hills again. They're talking about flowing rivers again. They're talking about empowerment in their communities and revivifying democracy and participatory democracy and budgeting. We want this. Even conservative, one of the presidents of a gun club in rural New South Wales said that we need to listen to Indigenous wisdom in this moment because we haven't been doing it right. Why wouldn't we consult the people that have been here for 60,000 years? So it's been really heartening to hear that. And again, we're using that information to put together a collective vision of what Australia could look like in 10 years. What are the things that we all want in common? What are the things we can fight for instead of fighting against? So again, I think this is an extraordinary moment, and just to see the momentum, not only in Australia, but all around the world right now, from different corporates to schools to communities, even though we're not getting the right signals from our federal government, there's just an extraordinary amount of action when you go deeper, further down the layers. And now that it has become such a mainstream issue, the amount of investment, entrepreneurship, innovation that is going into this space and the solutions is just extraordinary. And there's a whole range of new and exciting solutions that are emerging every day now. So I have incredible faith in humanity, far more than I did 5 years ago. And I feel very proud about the conversations I can now have with my daughters that have changed very, very much so in the last 5 years. I can now tell them about the urgency, but with equal measure, I can say and point them to the wonderful humans that are doing extraordinary things around the world. And I do think we can pull this off. We'd get there a lot faster if we got more help from our government, but we're going to get there. And I think once really there's an acceptance of these solutions, how available they are, and how much they will increase and improve our lives, as Sarah was alluding to. Cleaner air, healthier food, stronger communities. Who doesn't want that? And this is what's on offer if we actually implement these climate solutions. So I think storytelling is so imperative in this moment. Let's convince people, not tell stories of depravity and sacrifice, but tell stories about what we can achieve and the benefits that we can get if we take action.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Damon. Thank you for reinvigorating and popularising storytelling and doing such a great job of showing us a better future for Australia. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Francis Wedden. Francis is the founder and CEO of Vulcan Energy, a zero carbon lithium business. He is a batteries and clean tech specialist, and he co-founded Vulcan Energy Resources and is the Vulcan Zero Carbon Lithium and the Vulcan Zero Carbon Lithium project in Germany, where he's joining us from today. Welcome, Francis.
Thanks, Fiona. Sorry, it's a bit early in the morning here. Thanks very much for having me, and very honoured to be going after the speakers before me. And Damon, loved the documentary as well. I really liked it. It had a really positive tone, which is sometimes missing from climate documentaries. So yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, my story is really, I'm a geologist by background. I have a PhD in exploration geology. I was lucky enough to come out to Australia about 10 years ago, actually in the gold industry, and became a resident and then became a citizen. My kids were born in Australia, so they're second generation Australians, I suppose. I had a bit of an existential moment when I suddenly realized that gold was of no use to anyone, and my job was really not contributing to the planet at all. So I realized in 2014 that we need a lot of metals to basically electrify transport. And obviously my training was in finding metals. So I thought, well, what do we need most of? We need a lot of lithium for lithium-ion batteries going into electric vehicles, and we need really unprecedented amounts. So I started a lithium company in 2014, and we built that up, and it was reasonably successful. And the project is now in production, supplying the Chinese market, doing what we do best in Western Australia, digging things up and sending them to China. I did have a sort of a second existential moment there, and by this point I had 2 kids. And I realized that the carbon footprint of this this metals production for the production of lithium-ion batteries going into electric vehicles was becoming very large. And in fact, just lithium alone, I calculated that if we went down the current route and produced enough lithium to electrify all passenger vehicles in the world, we'd emit 1 billion tons of CO2 just for producing the lithium. So I thought, well, there's got to be a better way. And that's when we started Vulcan Energy Resources. Essentially, lithium comes from 2 sources. It comes from mines and it comes from brines, which are salty fluids mostly in salt lakes in South America. If you mine it from hard rock, you emit a lot of CO2 because you've got to essentially roast the rock, which is very energy intensive. If you take it from brines in South America, then you're drying out the second driest place on earth, the Atacama Desert. And local indigenous communities have been really protesting about this, so also very problematic. There is a third way though, which is from what are called geothermal brines, which occur in multiple places around the world. They're basically a source of renewable energy deep beneath the earth. And some geothermal brines are rich in lithium. So the idea was we're very good in Australia at extracting things out of things, and we're good at lithium extraction. So we have that expertise. And we have this source of renewable energy, which has lithium in it. So why don't we use the renewable energy in those geothermal brines to take the lithium out of the brines? And therefore you don't need any fossil fuels, you don't need to roast anything, and you can recycle the water as well. You can also produce an excess of renewable energy, so you can actually become a net renewable energy generator. So you're actually decarbonizing the grid and actually producing a net negative carbon product as a result of that. So with that in mind, we started Vulcan, and it was really a revelation, and it continues to be a revelation because we've been I guess pretty successful at developing the project. We've identified an extremely large resource here in the center of Europe, which we're developing. I think with Australian sort of entrepreneurialism and expertise in the lithium industry, combined with renewables know-how over here in the geothermal space as well. But what's blown me away is that my inbox is full every day from people in the same industry as me, wanting to work for companies that are aligned with their ethics and their beliefs. And really, this hasn't really existed so far in the natural resources industry, or I'd say the mining industry in Australia. So people are flocking to us, and that's of huge benefit to us as a company, because we're getting, I'd say, the brightest minds in the industry. The company is absolutely full of PhDs and just the smartest minds in chemical engineering, in renewables, mechanical engineering, geology. And we're putting together all these different disciplines to create a combined renewables and chemicals company, basically producing the chemicals for lithium-ion batteries. So there's people from all walks of life in Australia contacting us and saying that they want to work together with us and help take the project forward. And that's a huge benefit to us as a company. We don't need to recruit people come to us. So fast forward to now, the project is going really well. The company now has a fully diluted 100 million market cap, which is not bad from being just a whiteboard idea 2 years ago. We're aiming at being in production by 2023, so we want to be a renewable energy, so we can do both heat and power. That's the other advantage of geothermal. So we want to be a renewable energy generator by 2023, and also a producer of lithium for lithium-ion batteries to electrify transportation. We are at a complete watershed moment with electrifying transport. Last month it was announced that Norway had gone 80% electric, 80% of vehicles sold were electric in Norway. In Europe it's happening extremely quickly. In Australia will follow as well. Hopefully we'll get some tax breaks on electric vehicles, similarly to what we have in Europe as well. But the whole world is changing very, very quickly. So this is the moment, and we're trying to seize it, but also not to make the same mistakes that have been made in the past, with Dieselgate, etc. We want to do this transition in the right way. We want to produce the materials that we need to make this energy transition happen in the right way. So yeah, thanks very much.
That is just such a great story. Thank you so much for sharing that, Francis. It's just a great example of how, it's possible to transition, and that we can conceive and create jobs and create solutions if we really turn our minds to it in this space. You talked about bringing the brightest minds together, and it's my pleasure to introduce Heidi Lee. And Beyond Zero Emissions have got a very strong record of bringing the brightest minds together over the last 10 years to do incredible work. Heidi is the industry investment lead at Beyond Zero Emissions, and she brings 20 years of experience from the building industry to the role, recently delivering complex design and feasibility projects for health, university and local government clients. Heidi is an invited guest lecturer and reviewer at local universities on the topics of sustainability, collaborative design and client engagement. Welcome, Heidi.
Thank you so much. And like I think everyone before, it's an incredible privilege to be here and share the space with so many bright people here speaking, but also in the chat. I'm joining today from the Wurundjeri land of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders who are here today and those past and present and emerging. I think you've proven that I'm as much a nerd as the people who come together at BZE to help create the solutions that we do over the last 10 years. I've volunteered for BZE since 2010, and 2 years ago I joined on staff. This year, of course, everything changed. So Beyond Zero Emissions is an independent think tank. So we use research to demonstrate, independent research to demonstrate that there is all the technology and everything that we need at our disposal to make the transition to a zero carbon future. And that is great to see that 10 years after we first published our first report, like this is old news now. So that's kind of really exciting to see that the conversation has at least shifted a lot in that time. But action, we say, has not yet got there. So one of the main things that BZE runs alongside our research program is a program called Zero Carbon Communities. And this is where not necessarily individuals, but actually small groups or large groups of people sign up together to start to create and identify what local solutions look like. And they look at and they identify things that they actually want to do together. So they're taking this technical knowledge that we produce and so many other people produce, and then they get our support, access to knowledge, some volunteer support to help them actually bring those projects to life on the ground. Like I said, like everyone knows, lots of plans changed in March. So we went from looking at doing implementation projects in the Hunter region to help communities and businesses transition. And we decided to dial that up a lot because it really looked like we needed some pretty big solutions on the table. Beyond Zero Emissions created the Million Jobs Plan with 55 contributors, 20 different organisations contributing data, 30 more providing independent reviews, and a project advisory group of over 20 leaders from community, industry, union movement, traditional owners, and to really help to guide a piece of independent research that demonstrates the scale of opportunity that exists right now to actually accelerate in a clear, in a smart, and in a really impactful way, the transition to zero emissions. So it's just so exciting to work with this enormous group of people. Our business model is unique in that we are actually drawing together volunteers and pro bono contributors. Like the vast majority of our research over the last 10 years has all been led by volunteers coming together to actually create these solutions. And that means that by democratizing the process and democratizing these solutions, we've really got enormous buy-in from the day that you start developing the project, not the day that it actually gets published. And I found one in my hands today. It's a rare thing to come from Melbourne and actually find something that you can hold on to and not just on your computer screen. It's great to have it. I encourage you, let me know if you want one and I'll add you to the mail out list. What our Million Jobs Plan has identified is that across these 8 different sectors of the economy, you could actually bring forward technical solutions. So it is technical, it is clean tech investment, business opportunities in 8 sectors that would deliver over 1.8 million jobs in the next 5 years. That's exciting, right? And the main things there are the hero projects are things like retrofitting homes across Australia. 2.5 million retrofits delivers around half the amount of jobs that I described and delivers benefits in terms of, you know, comfortable, healthy homes, which is something that a lot of us who've had to spend a lot more time where we live right now are just getting enormous value out of. So while we've got all those technical solutions, you can download reports on our website and find out more. I think that one of the most exciting and compelling parts of this has been the way that communities have participated in this as well. Community groups have contributed their own ideas about how they would like to see stimulus money spent or exciting projects happen that would accelerate zero carbon transition ideas in their local communities. We have over 700 projects in a database now of great, smart, clean tech solutions that people in local communities really want to get behind. We're really excited to be supporting the Better Futures Australia initiative, encourage everyone to sign up and get involved. There are so many opportunities to really band together and through this collaboration, through the energy that we can create in this movement, really start to make a difference right now. So thank you for having us and look forward to being a part of this movement over the next little while.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Heidi. And it sounds like you're talking about a 2 million jobs plan. So even better. That's amazing. Now, sadly, our event is drawing to a close. But before we do, we have some opportunities and calls to action, ways in which you can engage in the Better Futures Australia initiative. You will find in the chat some links where you can sign the declaration, be part of supporting this call to action. We would love to hear your stories. Are you a champion? Tell us about the work that you're doing to help deliver a better future for Australia. And please also register and attend an online Better Futures Australia discovery session for your industry or sector, and look out for future events for around the Better Futures Australia Forum. So I think you'll see that all those links in the chat. So recognizing that when we close the meeting, they'll disappear. Make sure that you click on those now and open them up. We will be sending around a follow-up email. So sadly, I need to draw this lovely event to a close. I'd like to thank everybody for being part of this announcement. Thanks to the steering committee, to Lisa Cliff, who's doing an incredible job. Thanks to the core partners across industries and sectors. Thanks to the champions who shared their stories so far. Thanks to all of the ambassadors who are on board. And in addition to those who are speaking here today, there's David Lesser, Karen Maylab, Amanda Cahill, Kaushik Sridhar, Christina Hobbs, Claire Ainsworth, Herschel, Bryn O'Brien, Sally McCutcheon, Mindy Liao, Sasha Tchaikovsky, Uncle Ray Minicon, and Kathy Eacock. So thanks to all of those people, and thanks to you all for being part of this event today. It's now my pleasure to introduce Damien Walsh-Howling, who will take us out today. Damien has a highly successful film and television career over 25 years, and his extensive active experience has lent itself to a natural flair for directing others' honest, engaging performances. Through weaving powerful visual aesthetics with a deep passion for stories that celebrate the diversity of the human experience, Damien's work as a director spans the breadth and depth of filmmaking genres, from drama to comedy to international documentaries. Thanks very much, Damien.
Thank you, Fiona, so much. And not to confuse me with Mr. Damon Gamo here, who has just made one of the most amazing films that we've all spoken about on this forum. I had a few things that I wanted to say, but I feel like everybody has said them so beautifully here, and most of them have been covered. So what I wanted to do instead was just share a little story and then a poem by a really incredible poet, Mary Oliver. But the story is that I'm living down in Lorne on the Victorian coast. And 2 weeks ago, I was engaging in one of my greatest passions, which is surfing and spending time in the ocean. And there was about 7 surfers out, and a single dolphin, this is a true story down the line, a single dolphin came and spent 3 hours with us and played around in the water with us, moving between all of the surfers and taking its time to spend time with just about each person. And came up as close as this to my hand, like right here. At one point, it sort of came forward, and I flinched, which was something that I regretted later. But it was surfing underneath us, and it was playing around, and we were all so touched by this. And everybody found, you know, people were sort of expressing that they thought it was strange, but I didn't think it was strange at all. I thought it was a really, really incredible moment that showed how all of the aspects of nature and the world fit together, and how we are part of that, and how so many Indigenous cultures around the world actually don't have a word for nature because they're not separate in their conceptual reality to nature itself. And I rang a marine biologist who I know, who's currently doing a study in Bermagui on penguins. So he's in the field, to ask him about this single dolphin, and he laughed a big and very hearty laugh and said he'd seen that maybe once or twice in his entire career. And I said, do you think that dolphin has been separated from its pod? And he said, no, I think the pod's around somewhere, but that dolphin has somehow come into contact with humans and has a total affinity in that way, and it will find its pod again. Sure enough, for the next 2 days, it played with kids in the bay here in Lorne, and then a pod came by and it was gone. It disappeared, just as nature does. And one person who captures that in the most beautiful way on our incredible planet here on Earth was Mary Oliver, but still eternally she captures that. She died only last year. And there were 2 poems that I played with, and I thought about which one to read. But I thought I'd read this one called The Summer Day. There's another one called Wild Geese, which you should all look into if you get a chance. But this one's called The Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper. The one who has flung herself out of the grass. The one who is eating sugar out of my hand. Who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down. Who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open. And floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, and how to kneel down in the grass. How to be idle and blessed. How to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Mary Oliver. Thank you.